So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews, where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and their challenges, and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted that we have with us Andrew Birch, who's the Managing Director at Symbiant. So firstly, Andrew, thank you for spending a bit of time with us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and Symbiant to the audience, what you do and how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, well, Symbiant was started in the 1990s, late 1990s, and we're a software development company. Now we are solely compliance, risk audit, and compliance management software. We deal with companies around the world. We provide purely the software so that they can manage their risks and their audit, do their audits and compliance issues, and that's what we've been doing for the last 23 years now.
Brilliant. And so fantastic. And hopefully we'll learn a bit more as we move through. But maybe if we start with looking at your background, Andrew, if we may, how you got into business and why this particular one.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a place called Amblethorne, which is near Halifax. It was between Bradford and Halifax. It's a little village, and I went to school in Queensbury. I left school at 16 with some CSEs, a handful of CSEs, and as my son didn't know what CSEs was. So I explained to him that they're a certificate of secondary education. He said, "So you went to school for 16 years?" And you left school with just a certificate saying you've been in school for 16 years. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. And he's now doing a medical degree, so he's doing nicely. But yeah, I didn't have that opportunity. So when I left school, I had to get a job. And being 16, I went to the job centre in Bradford. And there was a YTS opportunity, a youth training scheme back then, which was paid £29.50 a week. And I went to work in a camera shop in Bradford on Cheapside, which I did enjoy. I enjoyed that greatly. Then my first business, the first business I ever started was when I was about 19. I had an opportunity to there was a camera shop in Shipley owned by another Bradford company called Eric's, and they were wanting to sell the Shipley branch. And I did a deal with the owner of the shop to take it over, and that really was my first, I suppose, grinding in the business world. And you learn a lot, when you first do business. There's a lot you don't understand. There's a lot you don't know.
Yeah.
And there's the mistakes. What you really, I think one of the things that you don't really understand is how much time it's going to take and how much effort you have to put in. You think that once you're on boss, you can just watch telly all day, and that's not the case. It's the exact opposite of that. If you're going to have a successful business, you've really got to put your time in. So that was my first grinding into that, but ultimately it failed. People were coming into the shop for us to show them the cameras, the latest cameras, and then they're going to Leeds, to Jessop's, to Leeds to get a better deal.
Right.
So they were picking our brains. I mean, sometimes people would even have the audacity to come back with a camera they bought from Jessop's and ask us how to use it. So you can't just live off developing films and things. So eventually that business did expire. Then I had a job in between, and then I started up another business doing IT consultancy. This was helping small businesses with their IT, networking, and installing software onto the computers. That was quite good fun. And from that, I got an opportunity to take over a copy shop. At the time, this was early 90s, and if you remember, people used to have like these T-shirts, and they could have their own things like the face printed on them and things like that. Well, this was just doing black and white copying. But I thought at the time, there's an opportunity here to do color copying and to make T-shirts. So I bought the color copier. Well, I rented one, and I did the T-shirts, and yeah, that was good fun. And then people start coming to the shop and asking for printing. Could you do letterheads? Can you do business cards? And this, that, and the other. So I started offloading some of this work to a local printers. We became the sole supplier of work for this printer, so it made sense for us to merge the two companies together.
Yep.
And when we merged the two companies together, their designer, the guy who did all their graphic design, was a young man called Neil Harvey, and he had a hobby making these latex masks, and he was incredibly talented, unbelievably talented. And he used to bring in these masks that he'd done, and they looked just like who they were meant to be. He'd do Hannibal Lecter or something like that, and he'd look exactly like amazing. And I thought there's an opportunity here. I thought there's a business to be had out of this. So I said to him, would you, as a partnership, 50-50 partnership, are we to make these as a business? And he said, yeah, he'd love to do it. So I sold my half of the business, and with that cash, we opened up. We rented a mill in Ravensthorpe because it was the cheapest place we could find a mill, and we started making these masks. Initially, it was for fancy dress, and I'd go around the shops with a bag full of masks and take the orders, and it was fun. And then I was big fan of Star Trek and the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and things were out at the time. And I thought this would be great if we could make these masks, because these are great characters. These are wonderful characters.
Yes.
So I contacted Paramount, they just said no initially. They just said no, it's not going to happen. But I kept on at them, and eventually I got to get to a meeting with them in London. I went down with some of our masks, and we made some characters from Star Trek, and they were bowled over by them.
Wow!
So they gave us the licensing to make these masks, and so we started making the Star Trek masks. That led on to us doing Batman, and we also did some for Warner Brothers and things like that. We actually did the mask, the Jim Carrey, the mask.
Yes.
That ended up as our bestseller actually. But anyway,
wow.
So that led on to that, and then QVC asked us if they wanted to launch a Star Trek special, and they asked if we'd launch it with them. So we did. I was on that first one. Which on a Sunday night went down in London, and then Neil. Unfortunately, Neil had asthma, and he found the environment where we were really bad for his chest. So he wanted to move down to Devon. So that pretty much ended that business really, because I didn't want to move down to Devon. As nice as Devon is, I just didn't want to move down to Devon because I like being in Yorkshire. So that was that, and then I went to work for an American company who, this was now coming up to the mid-90s, and they asked me. At that time, the internet was, I suppose, just starting, and nobody really knew much about it at the time. And I was asked to do a presentation on it. So he said, could you tell us more about this and do a presentation for the management? So I did, and the more I looked into this, and I came up with this phrase, the global village, and I thought, this is what this is. This is the start of a global village, and so that's what I called the presentation, as it happened, the global village, and they loved it. They thought, this is great, and this is this thing. But and as I was thinking about this, I think there's a market here. People will want to sell here. This is what people want to sell. And I started talking to people in this business. Now, this is a successful American company. And I said, people will want to sell. Sorry. And they will want to sell. Sorry, I nearly slipped out my hand. It's so wet, that glass. Anyway, so yeah, I said, people will want to sell things. And nobody was in. They said, no, nobody will trust people on the internet. You won't, no, you can't replace a shop. It'll never happen. I said, well, it's not really to replace a shop. It's just it'd be just an extra, there's definitely a market here. There's got to be. And nobody else saw this. And this is what I couldn't understand. These were people who were, were intelligent people. They were in IT. They were dealing with big IT companies, and they couldn't see that this was the potential here. So I said, well, yeah. So I thought, right, I'll do it myself. So I got there was a programmer who worked at the company, and I said, in your spare time, this is what I want. And I said, because I want a shopping system built. We settled on originally there was two programs there were two languages at the time. There was one called ASP, which was Active Service Pages. That was like the Microsoft version of dynamic programming. And then there was another one which was PHP. PHP was more open source, more it was actually a better language actually. So he wrote it in PHP. I didn't know PHP, so I bought a book, PHP Programming for Dummies, and I taught myself PHP, and then I got myself a laptop, and I bought Dreamweaver. It had just come out, a product called Dreamweaver. It was version 1 of Dreamweaver, and from that I could then customize this shopping system. So I've got this shopping system, and it's sort of, I thought this is really good, and there was a company just starting at the time called WorldPay. WorldPay they partnered with NatWest to provide the payment systems, and they had a really good payment system, a multi-currency payment system. It was perfect. So the shopping system was designed to plug straight into the WorldPay system. Right. So it was a ready-made solution. So with the two, so you get the WorldPay system, or and you just plug this straight in. So I didn't know anything about web pages much then. So I found a company where I could get a website, and I set up a website, and I put this up for sale for £99, ready-made shopping system to sell your own stuff. And the potential. And I remember putting these figures on this website saying, the global market could be worth over $1 billion a year. Because this is what the thought was back then. Was it might be worth $1 billion. Can you imagine $1 billion? And so we put it up, and then nothing happened. I had this up there, and every night I was coming home from work, and I was starting to work on the website, and I learned about search engines and started putting them into search engines to get people to notice it. And for probably 3 months, nothing happened. Nothing whatsoever happened, and nobody took any notice. I don't even know if we had any visitors, because there was no really way of checking it back then. So so I just left it up there, and not much was happening. And then all of a sudden, I've got a sale, and this was probably 4 months, if not longer, into for the site being up there. We got a sale, and it's like £99. Oh, I've got £99 back of my £2,000 investment. So I'm starting to get a payback. And then nothing. And then a couple of days later, we got 2 sales, and it was and it was like, so. And then all of a sudden, we got 5 sales, and then the day after, we got like 7 or 8 sales. And it just went up and went up and went up and went up. And and then all of a sudden we're doing 30 a day. So it's like £3,000 in a day. Yeah. And we ended up selling over 30,000 of these. It generated millions. I mean, the money started just coming in so fast. Eventually, and it took a while, but eventually it just started coming in, the money. But with that, even though we'd built the site so it was self-help and this, that, and the other, with that, you get people contacting you. We got emails coming in. I thought, I'm going to have to get somebody to help me, because at the time I was just working from a bedroom from a house I was renting in Huddersfield. And it was so funny, because at one point when I had £1 million in the bank, and I was renting a house in Huddersfield, and it was the funniest thing. It was the funniest thing. Nobody knew. Seriously, nobody would have guessed. It was just the funniest thing, because this money was just coming in. Now, luckily, obviously, because of my business experience, I knew that money wasn't all mine. The taxman wants his fair cut of this. And at that time, it was just me trading as. So it was just me trading as the business.
Wow.
So I had at that point I thought, right, okay, so this we were very much in partnership. We're very much working with WorldPay at this point, and so I set up a separate business called Credit Card Merchant Services Limited. And that was the company that is Symbiant, was actually Credit Card Merchant Services Limited, but we traded as Symbiant. I came up with Symbiant because I'm a Star Trek, and I always like, Symbiant was I think it's a perfect representation of what software is. It's a symbiotic relationship with IT. Yeah. So initially it was me trading as Symbiant, and then it was Credit Card Merchant Services Limited trading as Symbiant, and then in the very early noughties, just about 2000, I had a chance meeting with a senior person at KPMG, who they were telling me that their clients have a problem with getting audit actions. So what happens here is that auditors will go and do an audit. So they'll go and have a look at something, and they'll finally craft the audit. They'll say, this is what the issues are, these are the problems, and these are our recommendations. And then what companies do is, or what a lot of companies still do, but what they did back then is they put these recommendations on a spreadsheet. They'd say, this is what would need to be done, these are the actions, and then they'd just email them to people and expect them to get done, and nobody ever did them. So these audits were getting done, but the actions weren't getting followed up on.
Yes.
So it's pointless. You've got these massive holes, but nobody cared. Nobody cared back then. But it doesn't matter. We've done the audit. That's all that matters. But KPMG, some of their clients were saying, well, is there a way we can do this? So get these actions. So we came up with a product called Symbiant Tracker. Symbiant Tracker was designed to give ownership of actions. It was simple as that. It was all based around audit. It gave them management reports as well, so they could see how well they're performing and how badly performing, where the problem areas are, where sticky points are, who's performing, who's not performing. Yep. So the spotlight all of a sudden is on people. You're giving ownership of something and the spotlight's on you. So if you don't do it, everyone's going to know it was you that didn't do it. And that made a massive difference. Actions start to get action. So it became highly successful, this product, because it was doing the job it was meant to do.
Yes.
And it wasn't expensive. We being a northern company, we don't charge much. So now these these customers of KPMG, because it was KPMG who was telling people about this, obviously they have a vast reach. And then these customers then asked us for more features, asked us for more things. Can you do this? Can you do this? And then auditors started to become risk managers. So they asked for risk management tools. So we built a suite of tools. This was back in about 2002. So we built this suite of tools that allowed people to not just do your audit, but you could also do your risk management as well. And it was all under one hood. It was the first product of its kind. This was a totally unique product. And this is what really drove us towards this, because I've always been interested in creating something new, not really reinventing the wheel. It's I like to invent the wheel rather than the recreate, creating it, making the wheel better. So by that time, the shopping system and that there was a lot of people piling into that market then, in the e-commerce market, and there was tons and tons of shopping systems that became on the market, and that, so I'd almost lost interest in that, because this new thing, all of a sudden we were the only players in the market. And although it wasn't as big a market by any stretch, it was nowhere near as big, but we had a unique audience. We had this, and we were dealing with really high level companies. We were dealing with well-known brands. And it's really nice when you as a small business person have got this huge company as your customer, a huge well-known company. And so, we ended up putting all our efforts into this. So we had a couple of programmers at this point, and we were just, creating these tools. So in 2002, we created the very first GRC product. It was the first one on the market. And back then, again, it was in PHP. It did the job wonderfully. I mean, it's nothing like what we've got today. It's nothing like the product we have today. But it's actually better than a lot of the other products that's on the market at the moment. Our first one is still better than where a lot of people are, but it's nowhere near where our current version is. But anyway, I digress. So that was really how we got into doing where we are today. That was the road to it. We listen to our customers, and which is really important, as you know. So listening to your people, what do you want? And if you provide, I remember the guy at KPMG, when he was trying to talk me into doing this, he said, "No, seriously, you want to?" And I said, "Well, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay? Are you going to hire us to do this?" He went, "Oh, no, you have to build it. We'll tell people about it, but you're going to have to build it." And I said, "But this is going to take quite a bit of investment on our part." And he said, and I was still intrigued. And he said, and he said those words: "If you build it, people will come."
Brilliant.
And it's true, and it turned out to be true. It did. They gave their clients what they were looking for, which was a solution for audit action follow-up, and we, we're dealing with then these people who then wanted more and more and more and more. So our relationships with these people went back it goes back a long way, and we've
Yep.
still got some of our existing clients back then. They're still with us, which is 20 odd years later,
Wow.
they're still here. I know there's not many of them, so because people that move on and things, but we've still got a couple of the initial ones. But since then we've just gone from strength to strength, really. Even through COVID, which was obviously a nightmare for pretty much everyone. Because people were working from home, our tool was designed for collaboration. So we actually
Yep.
benefited from the COVID, because we all work from home anyway. So it's always something I've allowed, even though we have offices, I've always allowed working from home, because after you've traveled, you'll know this stuff, especially around York, York's just like, it's like the M25 miniaturized, isn't it? The 1237.
Yes.
It's so I remember when I was working in York once, I remember just sitting in traffic for hours and hours and hours.
Would you excuse me for a second? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So I was obviously after years and years of spending queuing on the 1237, I was obviously fed up of the time that I was losing and lost in the car, sat there doing nothing. And
Yes.
I used to think at the time that this is just such a waste of someone's time. I was getting up at 6:30 in the morning to get to work at 8:30. And it was, because it was all queuing. It was all just queuing in traffic. So I always thought, if I ever, I would love a business where people didn't have to spend that time wasted. And that's when, with this business, that allowed for that. So when COVID came along and everybody discovered the benefits of working from home, we'd been doing that for 20 years, so
Right.
it was natural to us anyway. So it was just nothing changed really for us. But we did get, get lots of, new customers who realized that actually collaboration is actually a good thing, and, the tools to do it.
Yeah.
And so we've, we went from strength to strength. I know there was a lot of people who really lost out through COVID. And unfortunately, I can say we weren't one of them, but everybody has all businesses have the pros and cons.
It was a difficult time for many people, and but it's great to see how many businesses got through. Unfortunately, you say certain sectors, it was really properly challenging, but
it was
great that you were sort of preset. So alongside that as challenges, what are some of the biggest challenges you would say you faced in the growth of your business?
Well, because of this, because we've never with a business, if you start a business, if you get a business right at the beginning, if you get the right product at the right time, you have a much easier time of it than if you're trying to grind your way through a market that's not ready for you.
Yeah.
And I've been there, don't worry, I know that. But with Symbiant, it was at the right time. Everything seemed to flow. So it was quite a smooth transition. However, I'm pretty sure that, the lessons I'd learned from my mistakes in previous businesses helped me hit the ground running, which it did. Because I wasn't under any illusions of how much time I was going to have to put in an effort. Even when there seems to be no reward, you've still got to be proactive and believe in where you're going. You've got to have that belief and that desire to do it, and you've got to have the willpower to carry on. It becomes your life. Don't get me wrong. There is a point when you've got to go, it's not working, and you've got to have a cut-off. But you've got to give a business a chance to survive, and you've got to be able to do that. And what stops a lot of business is debt. If they borrow money, then that money's got to be paid back. And people often want that back with and the extra bits as well, and start putting pressure onto you. And if the money's not coming in, you can't pay it back. And that's a pressure that lots of young businesses just don't need, or any business doesn't need, actually. Yes. It's counterproductive. So we were always lucky because of the early start that we had, and the success with the shopping system. We cash wasn't a problem, so we always we were always very well funded. And the business itself never made a loss. Once we'd started making a profit, since that point, we'd never made a loss. I mean,
Brilliant.
it was, the software that we were doing, we were actually making, even though in the early days when we started doing the tracker, it was already still profitable.
Yeah.
So, but it did go hand in hand with the shopping system at the time. The two, there was a crossover between the two, which helped. But now it's just solely the compliance software. So the biggest challenges we faced is actually staff, people.
Right. Yep.
This is I think this is a big. I think this is people don't. I believe. I believe a person should be. A person needs to be willing to help. They've got to be conscientious of the job, but there's got to be a willingness to want to help the customer.
Yep.
You've got to be that. You've got to bend over backwards. I know it's an old-fashioned view these days, but I truly believe it.
Yes.
And finding people who've got that same belief, that same desire to want to help people. And I've always, with me, it doesn't matter who I've been working for. I've found it's been a personal thing. If you're dealing with somebody, it's a personal thing. So I've always gone the extra mile, because it's, I take it as a person. It's very personal to me,
Yeah.
and it's a reflection of me, to make them happy. And even when that they might be wrong, at the end of the day, you've got to try and make these things work. And getting staff that that's willing to have that give and take, and have that willingness to give the client the effort to rectify an issue. The big thing in IT at the moment, and this has been going on for years, is that people genuinely, I don't think, in a lot of businesses, they don't seem to care. They've got a website and you can complain about something and then nothing happens. Nothing. They don't get in touch with you. Nothing happens. And it's like, who's behind this? Why don't you care about what people think of you, or a problem that someone's got? And they're just, and this is the thing. There seems to be, there's been a change. There's been a shift in people's attitudes. Certainly when we were young, since we were younger. I mean, mind you, maybe that's a bit unfair actually, because there's always been the can't be arsed about, haven't there, really, to be honest? But there always has been. But there just seems to be this more attitude towards self, promoting themselves rather than getting involved in the business and help to promote the business. It's more, TikToking and things like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're all into that, but they're not into, I've never been a clock off, never to clock off at 5 o'clock. Even if my wage stopped at 5 o'clock, if I had to do a job, I'd do it until the end of the day, until I had to finish, and then I could leave, and then I'd leave. I would never leave. So if somebody had a problem at 5 to 5, I wouldn't say, "Oh, I can't help you. I'm sorry. I'm leaving in 5 minutes." I'd sort that problem out, and then I'd go. And that I think some of that seems to, it's still around. It's still around. There's still people out there, but I think it's harder and harder to find that sort of that level. So that would that's a long-winded to answer that question. I think that would be our biggest challenge would probably be getting the right staff.
It's become more and more challenging, I think, across the board, across industry. Consequently, I think we've got to be better at recruitment, if that makes sense. Before, it was very much a sort of a buyer's market, an employer's market. So we'd always have, if you put an advert out, you'd have 20 applications you could pick. I think nowadays we've got to market ourselves as being attractive to employees, rather than just say, I've got a job, if that makes sense.
You do.
And I think the key thing for both attracting and retaining great people is culture, is being clear on our values.
It is.
And if we get the right, if we market and we broadcast our values, then we'll attract people with the same values, and those are the people that would do the things that you would naturally do, if that makes sense.
It is. It is. You're right. You are right. It is true that it is, and it's the culture. It is the culture thing. I think that through every organisation, getting that culture right in an organisation is, like you say, it's really important. Even from the get go. Even for people starting out. Totally.
Right from
Yeah.
the start. If
Yeah.
you're clear who you are, you know what's your identity as an organisation, and that normally comes from its leaders, its owners. But you know, if you tell people what's important to you, then you'll attract people that think those same things are important. I've always had this belief, Andrew, that good relationships typically come from a match of goals. We both want to achieve the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great relationships come with a match of values.
That's right. Yeah. It's
The
true.
same things are important.
Yeah.
And so leading with that, we'll attract team, clients, even suppliers that align with us. And therefore everybody is, you know, happier, more effective because we're all working the same direction.
Yeah, it is. But and often, I mean, I know this is again. I think this is with me. I found that my most successful journeys were when I were on my own to start off with, because you didn't have that conflict. I think partnerships are good. They are a good thing because they bring in that different aspect. But I think in the early days, you can get a conflict of it can work two ways. I think that actually, I think it can work two ways because first of all, you can get if you get two strong people wanting to go in their direction, then you'll never get anywhere because you're both tugging away at each other.
Yes.
So, but if you can bounce off each other, that's brilliant. That's a perfect partnership. But they're again hard to find.
Yep.
You know, usually one person's got a different agenda to somebody else. And that's why, you know, sometimes partnerships can be I think a bit hard, you know. I mean, as a business grows and you've got your values, like you were saying, once you've established those values and once you've got your position and then you bring people in, then they have to fit into those values. You're just trying to find people that match that will.
Yeah.
But you've already got that established values.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And it just is becoming more important because of the more difficult way to recruit people. And, you know, I suppose if we just recruit on a job, then we'll get people with their own behaviours, attitudes and values. So that's why we need to, and it's part of the actually coach process of recruitment, is we primarily recruit on values. We actually talk about, if you're the person that wants to work with us, you'll believe these things to be true. And then the job comes afterwards. You know, it's literally
because you can teach people skills. You can teach people the skills they want. You can't change their attitudes.
Absolutely. 100%. So alongside that, is there any other key learnings you've got about business in general, about growing businesses and
Well, yeah, it's I think the attitude. I think what you've got, don't be under any illusions. I think when it comes to a business, just don't be under any illusions. Don't think that this is a 9-to-5 job. Don't think this is a part-time thing. It becomes your life. It really, if you want it, you know, you've got to have the skills to do the job. You've got to have the ability, definitely the skills and the ability, but you've got to have the tenacity to keep going at it and the belief, you know, the belief that it'll work, because you know, it doesn't, even if you're setting up a pie shop, you know, next door to another pie shop, you've got to believe that what you're doing is going to be better than next door, or else there's no point.
Great.
So and if you do believe that, and if you can articulate that, and if you've got the ability to make it better, then you'll do well, you know, if you're willing to put the time in.
Yes.
Too many people these days, I think, are going in for the wrong reason. They all think they're going to be loaded. You know, it's all going to be money, and they're all going to be able to be, you know, do as you like, sort of thing. Attitude. It's like, oh, I'll be able to go on holiday more. I'll be able to do this, and it's just the opposite. It's absolutely the opposite. Don't ever go into business just for the money, because you know it's not that's not guaranteed. And a lot of businesses, I'll tell you, at my shop days when I had the shop, I'd have been working for less than minimum wage. I can tell you, you know, I should have sued myself for how little I got paid doing the shop, because shop work is hard. It is hard, and it's for little reward. You know, even if you've got a good idea, you know, the competition, I mean, now especially, but even back then, it wasn't. You know, restaurants are different. Restaurants, if you've got a good idea with a restaurant, you've got a good spot, you can do something that's different and makes, you know, because people like to go out and eat, and hospitality, that's, you know, that's, again, you can be unique on that sort of thing. So it's picking the right business, isn't it? It's picking the right business that fits you. You've got to be happy. You've got to be happy in what you do. If you're not happy, it won't work. You know, that's the key thing. Actually, I think I've learned, Chris, to be honest, happiness. I think if you and in order to be happiness, you've got to have You've got to have a purpose, a useful purpose.
Yeah.
If you've got a useful purpose, then you're happy. I don't know why the two go together, but it's like you've got a place in the world.
100%. Yeah, it's one of the reasons the main reason I joined Actually Coach was because I think it was to sort of undermine the myth of a lot of people believe that business is about putting your life on hold for 10 years and hope the money turns up eventually. And my clear proposition is if we're enjoying what we do, then let's enjoy what we do, and therefore we'll get there happier anyway. But probably because we're happier, we'll be more effective and therefore more profitable. So
it's true.
Go together. It's not, you don't have to do stuff you don't like doing and hope that the outcome is. If you focus on that idea, I think they call it being in flow nowadays, but it's just like doing stuff I'm really good at and I really love. Then all of a sudden things start to click, and I think that's really key.
Because there are going to be dark days in a business, early days of
100%.
There is. It's going to be, and especially if you've had to borrow money to get the business going, because then you've got an extra worry and things like that. So you've got to, you've got to get past these. You've got to have the will to keep on going and to get past them, because there's a good chance if you've got the staying power, like it did with us in Symbiant in the early days, for the first 6 months, nothing, then all of a sudden, it's like, you just won the lottery. And it literally was like that. It was literally almost overnight. It just started to come in. But that, I could quite easily have thought, forget it, let's move on. I mean, if the costs had been higher, to be honest with you, Chris, if the costs had been higher, I might have even done that. I might have even thought this is just not ready yet. We're just not ready. So if as it was, my outgoing was very little, because at that time, I can't remember, I think it was costing me something like £100 a month just to keep the business going at that time. It was very little. It was nothing. But just plodding along with a website, because that's all it was once the investment had been done. It was just having a website and my time later on. But I still put the time in, and but anyway, I genuinely feel sorry for these people who set up a shop just before COVID, who set up a business and they had to close down. I genuinely think that is just so terrible for these businesses who that happened to, because that first year is so crucial in the business.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it really was a very fundamentally, fundamental problem, especially for things like retail, leisure, those sorts of things. So I think you're aware we're a business coaching organisation, and I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, life in general, Andrew.
Ooh, no, that's a tricky one. Okay, through your life you meet a lot of people, don't you? And I think to pick one out is disrespectful to those in many ways. But people early on in your life obviously have more influence on you. But I don't, because there's people who influence you in different ways. There's somebody who might have just been such a terrible person that you wouldn't put them down as anybody who's influenced you, but they have, because you've gone, I don't want to be anything like that person. That's what I'm not going to be like. So you've got negative, their negativities influenced you in a positive way.
Yes.
But I think that the most interesting person, the most interesting person who I really did enjoy talking to was Ken Morrison.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think he was a really nice chap. He was a lovely man, and I idolized him, I think, because he was a Yorkshire businessman that had done so well early on. He'd seen that although he did inherit his father's stall, that's really what he'd inherited, effectively a stall.
Yes.
And it was him that came up with the concept of the supermarket. And he built that chain. He did, and he always kept his feet on the ground. He always, one thing he once said to me, and this is the thing that's always stuck with me. He said, "There's nobody in your organization, in your business, that knows the business like you do." And he said, every single thing that's going on in that business. And I thought, yeah, actually, he's right. And there's nobody, and only the person who started, the person who's built that business knows that.
Yes.
And he, even though it was a hugely successful business, and he was, and he was at the top of that tree, you'd see him sometimes on the ground floor, cleaning up, with a mop and bucket, mopping up a spill in the supermarket. He's the only multimillionaire, practically a billionaire, that I knew that would do that. And
Yes.
you know what I mean? There's not many people who, so too many people elevate themselves above everybody else. They think themselves better when they're not. We're all the same. Do you know what? I'll tell you something. Actually, there's a huge there's not there's such a fine line between success and failure. It's such a fine line.
Yeah.
And it's so easy we look at people. This is related to that question, but you look at people like Elon Musk and whoever, and you think, oh, they must be brilliant because look how successful they've been. But actually, if you'd have had the same opportunities, you'd have walked the same path as they had, and you'd done this, you'd been doing their life as they were, you might have done the same thing. You probably would have done. And that's what a lot of life comes down to. It's the opportunity, and it's the path you've taken that leads you to that opportunity. So when you're looking at somebody and you're thinking, oh, I'm all in awe of that person, don't be, because quite frankly, it's more often than not, it's circumstances and luck, and it's just been timing that's got them there. It's more often than not, they're not any better than you think they are. You're not looking at some super person. And I've met some people who really do think that they are, because they've done reasonably well, and they're the worst people in the world. The people who you would not go for a drink with. But Ken Morrison, you would do.
Yeah.
He was a really, really, really. I admired that man. Out of all of the business people that I knew, he was the one that I would admire the most. Yeah.
Brilliant. And do you have any favourite quotes or sayings that you catch yourself using quite a lot, Andrew?
Well, yeah. I actually am a great believer in karma. I really believe in what you do comes back on you. So yeah. I often say what goes around comes around,
Yes.
And that's probably the most frequent thing I say. And I say it to my staff, and I say it in a joking way with them. So if somebody does something or they haven't done something right and a customer has a problem because of it, I say, you can sort that out, and that's karma. And that's that's happened because of what you didn't do right. And so and then you can, you're not going to put that onto somebody else, because that's not right. Somebody else shouldn't clean up your mess. And although that's obviously just in a very joking way, but I truly believe that what you do comes back on you. So if you put out good and if you're honest, I think in business, honesty is the biggest factor of business.
Yes.
People got to trust you. You've got to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think if you're honest and you're a good person and you do things for the right reasons, then your life will be a lot easier than if you're a thief.
Yep. Yeah. No, I'd agree. And what would you say you've learned about yourself, Andrew, over this time?
Well, that I'm not always right. I think that's the biggest thing, that I'm not always right, and I think I've learned that not only to listen to people, but also to seek out other people's opinions.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest factor. Early on, I knew everything. There's nothing I didn't know, and I didn't want to listen to anybody. If somebody started, I don't want to know your opinion, because I don't want my opinion fogged. And so that was what it was like back then. And then over time, I realized that I didn't know everything, and actually more often than not I was wrong. Sometimes I was right, sometimes I was wrong. But other people's opinions, it's good then, and then you can take a more balanced view. The more people's opinion you get, the more balanced your view can become. So the more people you talk to, you can then it does. People's opinion does. It's the wisdom of crowds effect.
Yeah, brilliant. And brilliant. And so sort of looking forward, Andrew, what does the future look like for you guys, and what are the main challenges you face, if any, do you think?
Well, because compliance is currently a big thing. It's becoming a bigger thing. There's something that's just coming through called ESG. It's the Environment Social Governance Act.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is. The world's burning. The world really is burning, and I think that companies now of a certain size, I can't remember, I think it's something like if you're over 250 employees, something like that, you've now got to actually have an environmental policies, you've got to have social governance policies, and you've got to have governance in the business. So because of that, our product's perfect for that. It's been designed, it's been designed so that it allows you to manage your policies and to do your governance and things like that.
Oh, great.
So for us, that's a good thing. That's actually a good, that's a positive factor. So and with AI, a lot of people are going to find a problem, their jobs at risk with AI, because there's a big buzz about AI at the moment, and it can do a lot of tasks. It's not where people think it might be, but it can do a lot of tasks, and it gets a lot of things wrong. Actually, AI still gets a lot of things wrong. However, it is a danger to people's jobs. It's going to replace, if the computer says yes, the computer says no sort of jobs, it's going to replace those sort of jobs. However, in the industry that we're in, it requires people's it requires experience to become a risk manager or to become an audit manager. It requires perception. You've got to be able to look at something, and then the experience will tell you what that is. Yeah. And AI can't do that. AI is based on it is an algorithm. At the end of the day, it is just information that's judging. But with a person, there's more to it. A person's thoughts are more to it. So I can't see people being replaced by AI in this industry. So hopefully it'll keep we'll still be going strong in 5-10 years time. But you don't know. The fact is, Chris, in business, shit happens.
Yeah,
and anything
absolutely.
and anything can happen. So but that's where hopefully we're going to be heading. But we shall see.
It roll with the punches, I think, Andrew.
It is.
And find the way.
You can't anticipate every single thing that's going to go right or wrong. You've just done exactly what you said. Roll with the punches. So as they come along, take it on the chin. Because I do know what, a lot of the things you think are going to happen never happen.
No.
Most things you're worried about are never 100%.
Happen. No. Yeah. But we have an acronym for fear, which is false expectation appearing real. It's like we worry about things, and most of the time it's a false expectation. It's not going to happen. It might happen, but then it might not happen, and that's that. And we have a choice about which we choose to believe. And I would suggest most people will have a happier life if they choose to believe it will go right, while looking at what might go wrong.
Exactly, it's what you put out. If you put out positivity, it'll come back on you.
Absolutely. I think one of my favourite quotes is Henry Ford's: "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right." And for me that's the fundamental, because it is about, once I decide I can, then the question becomes, how can I, rather than can I.
It's true. That is true. Yeah. And you work your way through it. You find
And the other thing I found, which I don't know if exactly as you say, things might go wrong, but the likelihood is things will go up. The big things that go wrong are across the sector, across our competition, and therefore it's our ability to deal with the same challenge we're all facing better than our competition that will keep us going.
Well, this is actually sorry, Chris, but you've just if I don't budge in here, I'll forget what I'm about to say. But that's exactly one of the reasons we are the smallest in our sector. We are by far the smallest. All our competitors are owned by equity firms and the big conglomerates. So they're problems. They're going to be. They've got huge overheads. They've got lots of staff. They've got lots of staff. They can't be nimble. They can't move like we can. So when we come up with an idea, we can just do it. We can just make that happen. I mean, we work very closely with our clients. So and it's refreshing for our clients, because they ask us for something, and then within an hour they've got it. They're not waiting until the next release, 6 months down the line. So I think that the bigger your competition is, the more chance you've got of surviving. Because if something like you said goes across the sector, they're going to be the ones that find it get hit hardest first.
I think it's the ability to be able to react, as you say, however you do. I mean, big companies should be able to, but often they lose that flexibility as they grow.
Yeah, they
You
do.
can still be big and flexible, but not many organisations are. So
No,
it does.
you've got too many egos often. You got these,
Well, often there's internal politics going on in
yeah,
large companies, which you can't really afford to have in a smaller company, because
no,
it would rip the centre out of it.
yeah, yeah, that's
So
true. It would.
I'm keen to know, Andrew, what you'd say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now.
Um, well, I think like I said before, don't do it for the money. Um, uh, you've got to, you've got to, you've really got to be committed to whatever you're going to do. You've got to be committed. You've got to believe in it 100%. You can't, you can't go into something half cocked. You've got to also be prepared for it to become your life. This thing is going to consume you. So choose something that, like we said before, that that's going to make you happy. Make sure that you're going to get pleasure from this thing, because if you go in with the wrong reasons, if it's just like, oh, it's all about the money and I can make a fortune from this, if it's that sort of attitude that you're going in with, your chances are you'll fail, because you're going in for the wrong reasons. The money will come, often does. If you do it right, the money,
Yeah.
the rewards, the money, but going in for the money is the wrong reasons. So I think I'd say that really is just be committed in what you're doing. Don't go in with any illusions. Go in with the full expectation that it's going to be hard. If it's not hard, then great, you've done well. But expect it to be hard, and and give it a year. Give a business, if you're going to do it, you might, just because something's not happening instantly. We live in a world of instant gratification, and it's not real. It's not. You don't get instant gratification from a business. It
Yeah.
can take time to you've got to build a reputation. You've got to get people to know your brand, to know you, and to want what you're doing. Even when you open up a shop, even though you've got a passing trade there on the high street, people walking past your shop, it's still, you want people to travel to you, because just the passing trade is not going to be enough unless you're selling coffees and things like that. But what's going to make you different from the coffee shop next door? Why are they going to call it your coffee shop and not theirs? So you've got to have a USP. You've got to have something that's better than everybody else around you. You've got to have a vision. And even if that's service, you know what? Even if the two coffees taste the same, but you serve it with a smile and the other person just serves it with a frown, they're going to come to you for the smile. So it can be as simple as a service. It can be something as simple as that.
100%.
But it's just finding, and so be committed. Yeah, definitely be committed, and prepared to work and all the hours God sends, and make sure you've got a good idea, and you've got the skill to do it as well. You've got to have the skill sets.
Brilliant. No, yeah, absolutely, very, very sound advice. And looking back on your career, is there anything significant that if you started your business again, you might do differently, do you think?
Do you know, because I've had so many false starts in business, as it were, so many trial runs in businesses. When I started this business, it just worked well. So I wouldn't change.
Right.
The only thing I'd probably change, the probably thing I would change is I would definitely buy a ton loads of Apple shares, and I'd buy a load of Bitcoins when they came out. Other than that, I don't think I'd change anything.
Fair enough. Yes. Which comes on to our last question, actually, which is probably a similar answer. But what would be the best advice you could give an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do so?
Buy Apple shares and Bitcoin.
Yes, I thought you might say
Yeah,
that.
no, I think I think that I would say to myself, if you care about somebody, give them your time, because when they're not there, you'll really wish you had.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I think that's what I try and tell myself. Whether I believe it at the time, I don't know. I think experience, you believe things through experience, and it's only when that happens to you you learn something. I think you learn things from experience, and I could tell the 18-year-old me and beer, whatever.
No, absolutely. I mean that is very true. It's just interesting to know what you might say, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's it's got to be open. I heard a quote a while ago which I like, which is good experience comes from good decisions come from experience, which comes from bad decisions.
It's true. Yeah, if you're bright enough to learn from them. There's so many people who make the same mistake time and time again. And if you stuck your finger in that plug, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt.
Absolutely. No, 100%. There are a lot of people that we meet that are just repeating the same. But occasionally, I've had to say to one or two people, and you know, I remember one or two people I've spoken to, and we were talking about what we do, how we help big businesses grow, and someone would say to me, "What, you know, I've been in business 20 years. What could you possibly teach me?" And I've had to say, with respect, looking at your numbers, you've been in business 1 year, you just repeated it 20 times. and it's meant with respect, but it's meant to hopefully make people think sometimes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't learn from your mistakes, we'll just repeat the same thing.
Yeah, it is. And you know, you'll never stop. You will never stop learning, because there's always if you're in the game, then there's going to be new things come along. And I used to, like I said, I used to think, that's way back when I was much younger, you know it all. And it's actually good to know that you don't. It's actually a really refreshing thing to and it's a good way to look at things, to think that I actually know bugger all. And that's how I think of things 100%. Now. And my wife, my wife would definitely agree with me. But my son, he would say, yes, you're right, you know bugger all. But actually, you know, I have that, I now listen, and I do listen, and I you know, and I go in with that I know nothing. I know nothing attitude. But you're right. You're totally right.
Best way. No, there's a philosopher called Hippocrates, who I researched a while ago, and I use it whenever I do any training, because often the people training have seen similar types of training, or even the same stuff, because we do a lot of repetition to help learning. But the quote is a pre-Socrates philosopher, but basically, no man crosses the same river twice, because he's not the same man and the river's not the same river.
It's true. It is actually true, and that's what people. Yeah, that is a really good quote. That is, and
super.
Yeah, and it is, because me, who I am now, I'm a completely different person.
Yeah.
So all of the crimes that I committed back then, if you put me in prison, I'm the different guy. You've accused the wrong guy. No, but it's true. It is. You change so much, and you continue to change. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really good. Yeah. And
because
your life does mold you. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
Always be humble. It doesn't matter how successful you are. Always be humble, and always be thankful that it was you that was successful, because it could have quite easily not be.
It's interesting you say that, because I've been lucky enough to meet quite a lot of successful people, and one of the common factors in general, certainly for 80% of them, is humility. You mentioned Ken Morrison. I was lucky enough to meet a guy called Sir Terry Matthews, he's a personal hero of mine, because he's the first Welsh billionaire. So he's the first man to make $1 billion, and he built the Celtic Manor Hotel and Resort.
It's lovely that. Yeah, that golf course there, it's beautiful.
Well, if I don't know if you're aware, but there's part of the complex which you can get through escalators. It's the old hospital at the bottom of the complex, and that's where he was born. So he bought the place. It's now part of the hotel, so you can have actually stayed in one of those rooms. But when I was lucky enough to meet him, but also part of being there, all the staff say he's such a humble guy that always talked to everybody. He lives in Canada now. He's not quite as hands-on as Sir Ken was at Morrison's, but he will always talk to everybody about how they're getting on and what they're doing. And most recently, I was lucky enough to speak to Kevin Sinfield, the rugby league captain of Leeds Rhinos, etc. And again, you couldn't find a more humble man.
No.
Amazing for everything he's achieved, both on the rugby field and obviously doing his extreme events that he's been doing, the marathons he's been running, etc. Incredible, humble. And I think humility is a common factor of many successful people, because they realise there's always more to learn and do.
And it's not that. I think it's also realising that it could quite easily have not worked out that for you.
Yeah,
it could quite easily have gone the other way.
Oh yeah,
and you're just thankful, I think, that it didn't. I think often I look back and I just think, it was only the stepping stones that led me here. Yeah. Something could have happened along the way, an illness. It could have been anything out of the blue. Something just sidewinds you, and it sends you off in a different path. And I could have just been some alcoholic now in a pub, and it could quite easily have been me. and
Yeah.
I'd probably be very happy being an alcoholic in a pub. But it's, but it is, and it really is that, and it is, and that, always remember that. That's what people always need to remember. So, if things go wrong, look at it at a positive aspect. Think, what have I learned from this? And that way, you haven't lost anything. If you've learned something, you've gained knowledge, and knowledge is more valuable than money. It is the most valuable thing you can have. So, so if you've gained that, you've won. So you win both ways. If you lose, if you've got something goes wrong and it all goes tits up, then if you learn from that, then you've gained. And if it doesn't go and you get financial rewards from it, then you've gained that as well. But money doesn't bring the happiness that people think, can I assure you. It makes life.
100%. It's a means to an end.
It is.
It's what it can bring. It can bring happiness. But in itself, it has no value to do that. And also, we don't need money to be happy. But that doesn't mean.
No, you don't. But you need purpose. You need purpose. You need to have a self. It's all inside. Everything you need inside. It's true. Totally true, Chris.
Absolutely. Well, Andrew, it's been really fascinating and very entertaining and inspiring talking to you. And I thank you so much for your time today. And just before we go, if for anyone that's interested in speaking to you or Symbiant itself, what's the best way of contacting you?
You can go to our website, which is www.symbiant.co.uk, and there's a contact us page, so you can send a personal message through that. It'll find its way to me if you say to my attention. That's probably the easiest way.
Wonderful. Well, once again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to maybe catch up in another 6-12 months and see how things are developing.
Okay, Chris. Yeah, look forward to it.
Thank you.